This video is an unplanned discussion on the Transition Spur after riding it in an endurance event this weekend. So I did the Croom 50, which is not a race. It's kind of like the Tour of Alaska that I covered in another video, in that you have a general start time, but it's not a race, and you have sag stops, and it's a party on the trails with a bunch of people. You can ride it fast, you can ride it slow, whatever. And so even when I had my other Transition Spur before I got this one recently, I never really rode it in a long event. I mean, I did some long days in the mountains, but never an event like this one. So ride time for this one was about 4 hours. And I want to talk about how the Transition Spur did, because when I was riding it, and by the way, I did make a video of that event. And what was cool about this event is it was my son's first 50-mile mountain bike event. He has done a 50-mile ride on paved trails, but never on mountain bike trails like this. So it was kind of cool. And so my pace, especially in the beginning, was not as fast as I normally would do, but it wasn't slow by any means. He's still a great cross-country rider. I was just making sure he didn't push too hard in the beginning. And he really takes his time warming up. He's pretty disciplined about it, much better than I am. But I made a video of that, so that is going to come out pretty soon. If I haven't put it out already, I think I'll put this one out first. But check that one out, because it was a beautiful day in a beautiful area. And this is probably the third or fourth time I've done this ride. So again, I want to talk about how the Transition Spur did in a long event like this. And bottom line is, it was perfect. Like it was probably the best tool for the job with cross-country wheels. And I want to make that distinction. It would have been fine with the stock wheels, but the stock wheels for this build, this GX build that I got in 2023, those wheels are a bit heavy. Again, they would have been fine for this event, but the cross-country wheels and tires were perfect. And I'll talk about, when I talk about the time trials that I've done with this bike, I'll show the tires and the wheels up close, which I really didn't do when I kicked off Project DC, Project Downcountry, trying to see if a downcountry bike can be as fast as a cross-country bike. But bottom line is, it stands podium carbon wheels, and I've got a Maxxis Recon in the front and a Maxxis Icon in the back. But I'll show that in my upcoming video, where I talk about the time trials of comparing the downcountry bike versus the cross-country race bike. So the Transition Spur for this ride, I loved it, because a lot of these trails were just flowy, smooth. You did not need anything more than a cross-country bike. But the downcountry bike was great. And then you did get into some more technical trails that were a blast on the Transition Spur. In fact, I found myself using the dropper post on some of the trails. If you're familiar with that area, there's a trail called Drunken Monkey with a bunch of drops. There's other sections that have drops. And it was really nice to be able to use the dropper post. Not that I really needed to, but it just made it more fun, because I could get my center of gravity lower, enjoy the drops a little bit more, hit them faster than I probably would have blind, because I don't ride these trails very often. So sometimes you're coming up to something and it drops off and you really don't know it's on the other side. But what I loved about the Transition Spur is the amount of travel, so 120 front and rear, being able to just kind of relax, especially when you get to the end of a ride like this, where your body's getting tired. You really appreciate not only the extra suspension, but also the more relaxed geometry. So you're not fighting the bike as much. And cross-country bikes with steeper geometry, they're fast, they're agile, they're nimble, but you have to work them harder, right? You do have to not really work harder, but pay attention more. Like, you can't relax as much. I also like the way the Transition Spur handled the corners on this course. The Transition Spur feels like it just flows. You flow from one turn to the next. You do have to initiate the corner, I found, a little bit earlier, and you have to lean the bike a little bit more. The Spur, and I may have said this in some of my other reviews of the Spur that I did a few years ago, the Spur feels like you're leaning with the bike more, whereas a cross-country bike, you feel like you're turning the bike underneath you, if that makes sense. It's the analogy of a slalom ski. You kind of, if you've ever water skied, when you're on a slalom ski, like, you're leaning into the turns on a more relaxed bike like the Spur versus the cross-country bike, you feel like you're leaning more. And I like the handling, that aspect of the handling on a course like this. It was still fast, and we even picked it up pretty good at the end. Like the last 8 or 9 miles, I picked it up to probably what would have been my normal pace if I were by myself or with a really fast group. Now, don't get me wrong, my son's he's faster than I think he realizes on a cross-country bike. And I told him, I was like, listen, you just do your own thing. I'm going to pick it up, just finish this ride. He stuck on my wheel the whole rest. In fact, we had a sprint finish at the end. You'll see it in that video. It was a good video. It turned out really well. But again, to go back to what I was saying, it was nice to have a flowy bike, but then one that could handle the technical stuff. And that's what's great about downcountry bikes, is they're fast, but they also have the ability to hit the technical stuff, especially on trails where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the trails are going to be like. Maybe you've never ridden there, or maybe the trails just have a lot of variety. You don't want a big, heavy, sluggish bike for the smoother stuff, but you want a bike more capable when you hit the rougher stuff or the more technical stuff. That's where the downcountry bikes like the Spur really have a benefit. So bottom line is, for this kind of event where you're doing a long day, to have the pedaling efficiency of a bike like this has the pedaling efficiency of a cross-country bike. To have that kind of pedaling efficiency, and then also have a light bike, and then have a bike that had the more relaxed geometry and the more travel, perfect. In fact, doing these kind of endurance events, whether it's a full-on race or just one of these fun events where you go at your own pace, this would probably be the weapon of choice. I rode my 9er RKT9 in an event a few weeks ago at San Francisco, and it also did great. That event was rougher. Like, those trails are more rooty. They're just rougher. The climbs are steeper and longer. And the cross-country bike was still fine, but I would say I felt a little fresher at the end of the ride on the Spur, just because, again, the travel and the geometry. So, like I said, just a kind of impromptu video that I wanted to make talking about the Transition Spur while I'm right in the middle of Project DC. Stay tuned to the time trial video coming up in a few weeks, because it's getting real interesting. I'm not going to tell you what the results are yet, but I'm going to do another week of time trials on the Spur, and then my shock's coming back in from the rebuild from Fox, so I'm going to put that back on the cross-country bike, and I'm going to do at least a week, maybe 2 weeks of time trials on that bike, because I want to make sure there's not like a fitness component into this, and I'll explain what I mean when I talk about the times, how this bike has compared so far to the cross-country bike. So anyway, if you like this style of video, give it a thumbs up. I'm saying that more because I'm realizing that really does help the algorithms of my YouTube channel. I really didn't realize that until recently. So give it a thumbs up for me if you don't mind. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do so, because I'm going to be talking more about the Spur and, again, how the lap times compare to a cross-country bike. That'll do it for this one. Thanks for watching.